is John Flannery, and I quite frequently give comments on what's going on publicly in public affairs. And there are a number of things presently that I find upsetting. But one of them is thinking of January the 6th and the riots that happened that day as Trump's coup, but Plan B. And if you forgive me, I made some notes because I want to get this precisely correct. We've wasted 9 months failing to investigate the coup planned by Trump and his traitorous accomplices. We have failed to ask some of the most basic questions. There are 2 sets of irreconcilable facts that we have not addressed, not even to ask the logical questions that arise out of those facts that we know to be true. One set of facts is the scheme to have Vice President Pence overturn the election by ignoring the Constitution and declaring electors invalid, causing a vote to make Trump president. Wrongly. That's the coup. Another set of facts by which the coup is accomplished is to storm the Capitol and take over the government by force. The violent takeover, in my lexicon, was Plan B. Plan A was the peaceful, traitorous way to run the coup. The question is, when did they know Pence was not going to say, not no, but never will I do what you want. Call me a pussy or whatever you want. I've been advised not to do that. So that's our problem here. The answer is they, Trump and his cohorts, didn't know for sure until January the 6th, the day of the uprising, when the 2 houses were meeting, to confirm what the several states and electors had decided after rejecting all the claims adverse to Biden's pro forma recognition as the president-elect. That meant Plan A, if Pence wasn't going to help, could not occur. So Trump and his minions went with Plan B and were not uncomfortable with the danger to Pence, who might be hung when they were charging the Capitol. Nor were they concerned about whether the speaker might be kidnapped. This meant there was a planned alternative B, and perhaps an audible occurred on the play on the morning of January the 6th. Now, on January 6th, when it was clear they would not have the quiet takeover, they went with the violent overthrow. Now, was Roger Stone standing with the Oath Keepers on the street in the front of the Willard Hotel, taking selfies, giving interviews to call that play on January the 6th? It's a fair question, but no one has asked Stone or any of the Oath Keepers what Stone was up to. No one has spoken to Steve Bannon. In fact, no one has spoken to any of the principals who were in the White House, on the Hill, in the intelligence network that may have kept the information from the key players who could have defended themselves otherwise. Pence, let's consider him. He may have been the most humiliated vice president in American history, like a lapdog, hanging out in the West Wing, in the Oval Office, waiting for political scraps to justify his existence in a political world in which the Orange Menace inhaled all available media, sound, air, and pixels that he could. There's no room for anyone else. And anyone else who got anything, he would then immediately drive out of the public view. Now, John Yoo, he was an infamous conservative legal scholar, in my opinion, who was just fine with torture. He drew the line at having Pence violate his constitutional duty to confirm Biden as the president-elect. Yoo reportedly said, quote, Pence had a choice between his constitutional duty and his political future, and he did the right thing. Some thought of Pence for having courage to do the only thing that was constitutionally permissible. Of those who have done so little, not much can be expected. Not in the Trump administration. Not when we have people, luckily for us, writing books now about what they observed in silence that was wrong while they were in the administration, when they didn't blow the whistle on it, and now they seek to make profits from books telling us what really happened. We'll take the evidence, but we'll decry their participation in what they're disclosing. Pence would only go so far. Yes, the riots occurred, the vote occurred, Biden was rightly identified as the president-elect. But he was invited to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president with the support of the cabinet, but he passed. We turned, therefore, to impeachment. The second time a president was impeached, nothing in our history compares. And then Majority Leader McConnell, before his term was up, delayed the impeachment that followed. Republicans who had moved to oust Biden in those controversial votes on January the 6th, they were among those who saw nothing impeachable in what Trump had done or his cohorts. They were reset at an inert and unmovable status in the face of the insurrection that caused, if it succeeded, an overthrow of our government. So the fact is that when they went to Plan B, up the ante as Plan A, the quiet takeover, was failing, Pence wouldn't cross the Rubicon. And that is the narrow basis for our success in our continued government. Now, there was a plan encompassing A and B, and it was a written plan. And there were more alternatives than the two that I have discussed, although I've discussed the overarching two paths to what they thought was a successful coup. The real question is, how did we lose all that investigative time? January this happened. It's coming out in books and papers now. The government's not revealing it. Even the White House under Biden, God bless him, is not saying for sure he's going to let the public know whatever he discloses to the select committee in the House. The failure in so-called justice, even to have enough curiosity to inquire, has put our nation at risk. Nor can we ignore the fact that a subpoena from Congress, as legitimate as it is, does not have the force of a subpoena issued in a criminal investigation. That is a grand jury investigation. And as of this late date, after this many months, there is no known grand jury investigation that looks at the role of the White House and his cohorts, that looks at the House and the Senate, that looks at the intelligence, that looks at our defense and security apparatus to see who failed to do what. And the trail grows cold. And I don't think that's an accident. Now, the House has subpoenaed the key players, and more are being called as I speak to you. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Steve Bannon, Dan Scavino, a former Trump White House Chief of Staff, Kashyap Patel, Chief of Staff to the Acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller. Now, calling a principal among these names doesn't mean you get the truth. But you can confront a witness with earlier statements they've made that may be inconsistent or may be admissions. Other witnesses' statements, you can ask them, Joe says this and you say the other. You can confront them with phone records, tape recordings, public interviews, and more can be quite helpful to find out what really happened. But it gets easier to lie the longer you let the time pass, which makes us suspicious that these people really are above the law. If the subpoenas are stonewalled in the Hill investigation, they'll have less oomph to get the job done as compared to a grand jury subpoena. That's my point. Consider who these witnesses are that Hill and Justice should be scrutinizing. Meadows was in the vicinity of Trump on January the 6th. Bannon had conversations with Trump leading up to the insurrection. He had a meeting the night before the insurrection at the Willard Hotel. We've already talked about how the next morning we had the Oath Keepers in front of the hotel. Trump's family were with him. Giuliani was with him. All these people should have been interviewed in a criminal investigation, and it hasn't happened. For this discussion, it's important to consider that Trump and the usual suspects endorsed a plan penned, really, I guess, type, that had as its objective to identify all possible scenarios by which they could force a win for Trump. And they ranked and chose among those which were more likely to result in Trump as president. In other words, a successful coup. An unknown and unsubstantial, in my opinion, former law professor, John Eastman, authored the plan with the support of that erstwhile 9/11 hero, Rudy Giuliani, who's lost his mind, obviously. Eastman stretched his reading of the 12th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to the breaking point in a legal reverie that justified to him, the professor, that the vice president could decide which electors from the Electoral College are properly certified. And the theory was not to certify those who helped Biden, plainly. The 12th Amendment says nothing of the sort as interpreted by Eastman. It states, and I'm going to quote it, it's not long, it says, "The President of the Senate shall in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives open all certificates, and the votes shall then be counted." I have read the memo, originally headed Privileged and Confidential, January 6th scenario. Now, the first scenario cited is that the Vice President receives no objections, and in bold caps it says the result is Biden wins 306 to 232. He should have stopped there, but he didn't. He produced 4 scenarios by which Trump could finagle and distort the process and, quote, win wrongly. At the incitement to riot on January the 6th, Eastman was introduced by Giuliani. You may remember he wore a tan coat, he had a wide-brimmed hat, and a clashing shirt, and he told the rioters, "We know that dead people voted." Really. He told other things, but he also said, "All we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1 o'clock. He let the legislatures of the states look into this so we get to the bottom of it, and the American people know whether we have control of the direction of our government or not." Which is another way of saying, support the autocrats to destroy the Democrats, to destroy small d Democrats, that is, the democracy, our form of government from our Constitution, from our revolution to this day. Eastman basically disclosed the contents of their plan in his memo for taking over the government for Trump after he was beaten like a drum at the polling places. We must support the Select Committee's investigation on the Hill and in the courts, but it is an inferior mechanism to an actual prosecutor in a grand jury investigation to get at the truth. So we must demand that the Department of Justice do justice, that it appoint a special prosecutor, or authorize the U.S. attorneys to do something about this while it still matters, because at risk is our democracy, our Constitution, our laws, and the character of our nation. I say this because I think by informing you what my observations are, you're in a better place to object and to protest to what's going on. I think it is a shame and a disgrace that we have not investigated what happened on January the 6th, what led up to it, what happened after that point, and what's happening now in America. That's something that cannot stand. If we are to be a great nation and to continue as such, we must eliminate this toxic element in our nation that would destroy everything that this country has been about for so long, as imagined by our founders, paid for with blood and treasure to get to this point. So again, I'm John Flannery. I'm glad that you had a few moments to spend with me. And I hope that what I have said is of some help to you to tell you how we should go forward. All the best.